Hello, hi. Can you guys hear me? Am I live? Hello? Okay, can you guys hear me? I think so. Okay. Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay, good. Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. Well, welcome to Lay's first live streaming. I've never done this before, so bear with me if I seem a little unprepared. Well, thank you very much for those of you who join me from Europe. I understand it's 2 a.m. in London and 3 a.m. probably in Brussels. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for your support. So I want to give my fans an opportunity to ask me questions and so that we could have an interactive session. People have suggested that to me for a while, but I haven't, to be honest with you, I haven't got the guts to do it. But recently, I think more people ask me for that, so I think it's time. The way I want to do this is I want to answer your questions, but for questions that require a long answer, I probably won't address them here because it would take a lot of time, and I think it's best that I make a video to address that. So this is just an opportunity to answer some relatively easy, let's hope, and quick questions. Okay, I have prepared. Some of you have already submitted questions on the community board, and I have prepared. And I have already prepared some answers, but I think for those of you who are here earlier, I already see a lot of questions. I think the screen keeps rolling, so I can't catch up with all the questions. But there were a few questions that I got. One is about the leak of the Xinjiang camp, the labor camp in Xinjiang, and then also the UN High Commissioner's visit to China. I just think the timing is interesting. Right around the time that the High Commissioner has asked to visit Xinjiang camp for, I think, for quite a while. She finally got the okay. People's It probably will be one of those curated visit. They will do a show and tell. But with these documents leaked, I think it will put a lot of pressure on the CCP. And if you look at the documents that were leaked, it's very interesting. It's so detailed. It has thousands of pictures of Uyghurs detained in Xinjiang. And then the oldest is 73 years old, and the youngest is 15. And they have thousands of pictures and many internal documents. And it was said that it was obtained by hackers. I just think the timing is interesting. I wouldn't be surprised. I say that, but I've seen some China analysts say that as well. So they think it may be that some governments want to see change in China or want to see the human rights condition in Xinjiang to be improved, somehow release these documents. Is there a possibility? I think so. Okay, so that's what I will say about the documents. And the other question is about the recent leak of an audio tape of a meeting in Guangdong, in which the provincial government was organizing a meeting, was having a meeting about military, takeover of Taiwan. That audio tape, I plan to make a video about that in a couple of days, so I'll talk more in depth about that. But my take on the audio tape is this. First of all, it's a real meeting, right? The meeting actually took place. Now, whether or not, okay, let's say it's a meeting, but it's not a small meeting. If you listen to the audio tape, it does have a lot of background noises. And it seems that the audio was obtained from the video control room. the meeting. So you can actually hear instructions being given to cameras, you know. So that tells me it's not a small meeting. It's definitely not a meeting where you have a room full of people and having just a conversation amongst themselves. So it's one of those large meetings where you actually have audio visual service, you have camera, you have audio feed. So that tells me it's a big meeting. And also the speeches sound like they're all written. So they were all read. They're not spontaneous speeches. They were all written. So that tells me it's an organized large meeting. Now, it will be interesting to find out why the audio tape is released at that time. I have been reading different analysts, their take on the audio tape, and different people have different views, and I think I will share that in my video. Stay tuned. That's what I'll say about that. There was another question about, let me see, earlier, about whether I think China fabricates more. What was the question? Whether it's Russia or China that generates more fake information, or is it? Yeah. What's that question? Basically, which one is more deceptive, Russia or China? And I think the answer is definitely the CCP. I don't want to say China, but I want to say the CCP. Just look at how many in China we've seen replicas of the Eiffel Towers, the White House. We've seen fake products of every kind. It just seems that under the CCP systems, people are just more, how to say, they're more capable of creating fake information and fake product. And that's unfortunately has already become part of their business or operation, or part of their modern day culture. So that's what I say. The CCP is definitely a lot more deceptive. Okay, so I'm going to go back to some of the questions people submitted online earlier. Let's see. The first question is about North Korea. The person asked about China's position on North Korea COVID outbreak. Will China assist North Korea, or would North Korea accept vaccines from China? It's actually interesting. Last August, North Korea refused 3 million doses of vaccine from China. At the time, Kim Jong-un said it very diplomatically. He said, you should give it to those who are in need. So he was trying to save Xi Jinping's face. But at the same time, this January, when the United Nations expressed its willingness to donate 60 million doses of vaccine to North Korea, its UN ambassador expressed interest and then inquired whether it's Pfizer or Moderna vaccine. After the North Korea outbreak, Kim Jong-un made two comments that made the CCP leader very uncomfortable. First is he said that he blamed the pandemic on bureaucracy and medical incompetence, and suggested they should learn lessons from the responses of neighboring China. And then the second thing he said, this is a quote from him, he said, the more dangerous enemy than the virus is the non-science-based fear and lack of confidence and a weak will. And I guess this comment makes the Chinese leader very uncomfortable, but Chinese media picked that up immediately and used Kim's quote as a headline in an article on the Chinese finance website called Caixinwang. So the headline says, Kim Jong-un pointed out that non-scientific fear is more dangerous than virus. Guess what? The article had to change the headline. And then I'm not surprised if this article is removed later. Other interesting things that happen in China is that there's a 2-minute official North Korea video that the North Korean government made about Omicron. And it's 2 minutes. It basically tells its citizens that Omicron is not something you should be afraid of. It talks about it's highly contagious, but it has a low mortality rate. People should not overly rely on medicine. Basically, it's a promo video to give people public information of what Omicron is. And when the Chinese discovered, they said, wow, this is the best, this is the most user-friendly, easily accessible video that we've ever seen about Omicron. And guess where it's coming from? It's from North Korea. So the video went viral, and guess what? It's banned. So the Chinese authorities removed that video. I mean, in some areas, it may still be around, but I have seen that it's, for the most part, it has been removed. Now, as far as whether China is assisting North Korea, I think the Guardian reported that 3 airplanes from the North Korean airliner, it's called Air Koryo, arrived in China on the 16th of May and brought back medical supplies. South Korea's media agency also reported that 2 trains with 30 cars each passed the border between China and North Korea, probably also full of medical supplies. Do I think the Kim Jong-un would use a Chinese vaccine? Probably not at this point. I mean, they already achieved herd immunity, so he probably still doesn't trust a Chinese vaccine. Okay, so that's one question. And let's see. Oh, the other question is about the lockdowns. The question says, I find the lockdowns in China absolutely incomprehensible. So my question is, how is this draconian measure selling? Well, it's not selling well in China at all. In Shanghai, you've seen more and more public disobedience erupting. I just read that in one high-end community in China, citizens, people basically just self-declared the end of the lockdowns. They unlocked the gate and disregarded the community management office and the security guards and just walked out. And that community has many multinationals, people who hold foreign passports. So, and that incident quickly spread to other communities. So I don't think the officials can do anything about this kind of social disobedience. What the Chinese government is most nervous about at this point is not the foreign nationals in China. They're actually most nervous about the Chinese students. If you look at Chinese history, every major political event is signified by student protests. And June 4th is right around the corner, right? June 4th is the anniversary of Tiananmen Square massacre is right around the corner. So they're most nervous about all these young people being locked up on campus, and there are thousands and tens of thousands of them. So what we have seen is in Beijing, for example, in the Beijing University, we've seen students, dismantling barricades that were used to board up the students' dormitory to prevent the students from leaving their territory. And hundreds of students just dismantled the barricades at night. And also other schools like the Teachers College in Beijing and then the China's University of Politics and Law both have students' protests. Students held up banners that said, I want to be a free student. I want to be a free student. And they also put up banners that call the school administration self-terminating. So with everything that's happening, guess what are the key words that has become the hot search keywords in China? Can anyone guess? Let me see. Okay, well, all right. So I'll give you the answer. The number one keyword on Baidu is immigration to Canada. It rose, the search volume rose 2,800%. And the second keyword is where to go overseas, and that increased 2,400%. So obviously, people who have a little bit money want to leave China, and I saw that in Shanghai, many people are leaving Shanghai. They call that the doomsday exodus. But unfortunately, many poor people, people like laborers and students, they do not have the money to leave because the train tickets, the bus tickets are so expensive now. And also when you leave Shanghai, you are required to do self-quarantine, not self-quarantine, I'm sorry. You're required to be quarantined in state designated venues, and you're responsible for the finances. And many students and laborers are not able to pay for the lodging cost. So they would rather not leave. So that's with that question. I see. Wow. Thank you for your important work. Yes. Do you think there are a significant number of people in China who want to end China's seclusion? The Great Translation Movement will pick up. Yeah, I think that what they're doing is great. I think the Great Translation Movement is absolutely important and great. To some extent, I think what I'm doing is similar because there's just so much information available to Chinese inside and outside China about what's really happening there. But for the Western world, you have the language disadvantage, so you don't really have access to that information. So what I'm doing is essentially, compiling, analyzing, dissecting all the information that I read inside China from official CCP propaganda and also from other independent sources, compare them to also the Western media, and then offer my insight to you. So I think what I'm doing is also very similar, but I really think what they're doing is great. And the more people who are involved to do that, I think the greater changes we'll see in China. So hopefully I answered that question. Let's see. Oh yeah, the question about CCP will cease to exist in the next decade due to fertility and the Chinese debt crisis. Is that wishful thinking? I think the CCP will cease to exist probably sooner than that, and probably low fertility and Chinese debt is just one of the many problems that CCP is dealing with. But I think the internal political struggle, the factional politics, the fighting between right now, the fighting between the Jiang Zemin faction and the Xi Jinping faction is going to be the ultimate force that bring down the regime itself. Together with all the other problems, the economic problems. I think eventually people will. I think the downfall of the CCP actually already started. It started somehow this year. 2022 feels very different. I mean, from the beginning of the year, we've seen so many events one after another, and you've seen the public's response has been slowly built up. So I think the downfall of the CCP, rather than a quick fall like that, I think it's been extended, and it's such a slow downfall. I think the purpose is for us to see it, to learn from the lessons. So I think the downfall has already started. Yeah. How long will that take? We don't know. Let's see. Okay, so I'll go back to my question. There's some very good questions about, let me see. Oh, someone asked about what can China do to avoid a collapse of their property market? I don't think there's anything they can do right now to avoid it. It will collapse. What it is doing right now is trying to delay it, trying to isolate the impact or to localize the impact so that the whole system does not collapse. There's no way it can prevent it from collapsing. Recently, because if you really look at the Chinese real estate market, there's just no demand. There's, the population is declining, and everyone who has the money to buy a property has already bought it. And recently the government lowered interest, offered a lower interest. They lowered 20 basis point to first-time home buyer. But that's just think about, for those people who haven't bought real estate in China, they are either cannot poor, people who don't have the money, the poor, or young people. But young people, in order to help them buy real estate, you have to give them a job. And young people's unemployment rate is the highest in China right now. So that's just, these measures, lower the interest rate for first-time home buyer is not going to solve the real estate problem. And even though Evergrande is on everybody's mind, the state media or Chinese media rarely mention Evergrande, just because it does not want you to remember that. And recently, Sunac is the fourth largest real estate developer in China, and it's believed to have a better financial position than the other ones. Recently, in May, Sunac defaulted on interest payments of $29.5 million US on its offshore US dollar bonds. So that just tells you the reality of Chinese developers. There's just no demand, there's no market. So, that's that. Thank you. Oh, the other question is about Philippines. President-elect of the Philippines, Marcos Jr., has approached China's stance and is friends with China's ambassador to the Philippines. What CCP faction do his CCP friends belong to? Is it the Jiang faction or is it the Xi faction? That's a good question. I don't want to prematurely declare who his friends are. But what I want to tell you is I did a little bit of research. What I found is, I think this is Reuters, reported that in a cable sent to Washington, D.C. in March 2007, the U.S. Embassy reported that Marcos Jr. traveled frequently to the People's Republic of China in 2005 and 2006 to drum up business. Now, 2005 is like 3 years after China joined the WTO. It was really the prime time when all the Western multinationals rushed to China to open up the Chinese market. And it was the time when the Jiang Zemin faction was in power. I mean, Hu Jintao was the head of the party, but he was a weak leader. He never really had any real power, particularly in economic matters. So it was still the Jiang Zemin's faction that was pretty much controlling China during those years. So the fact that he went to China repeatedly during that time tells you who are the early friends he had, right? And also, after his visit to China, soon after that, China opened a second consulate in the Philippines. It's in the capital city of the province where Marcos Jr. was the governor, and it's a small city with a population of 100,000, and that's a small city in a country with 110 million population. So that tells me, obviously, that's a favor China did to Marcos Jr. Does that convince us that he's a friend of the Jiang Zemin faction? You be the judge. But that's what I found. Okay. All right. Let me see. Do I have any questions here? Oh, so many messages. I have a hard time keeping up with you guys. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the donation and the great comments. All right, so let me go back to more questions that I got. Did I answer that? Oh, okay, here we go. Will Xi Jinping start a rival economic faction to diminish Jiang Zemin mob? Well, hasn't he tried for the past 10 years? He really tried. One of the reasons that he controlled almost everything in his hands. Like he established all these committees that controls economy. So in a way, Li Keqiang's power was diluted or diminished. But was he successful in counteracting the Jiang faction? Based on what we see now, it doesn't look like it. So he doesn't need to start a rival economic faction now. I mean, he's been trying to do that for the past 10 years. If he does now, it's too late. And then the other question is, scenario ahead, should Xi Jinping continue as president? And would that mean thawing of ties with the U.S.? Mr. Xi Jinping is having a lot of internal and external, how to say, difficulties, right? I think it's the political situation in China is so unstable right now. The infighting is really getting out of control. For example, recently, a couple of days ago, Li Keqiang had a conference call with 100,000 officials across China. 100,000 people conference call, I think, is only something that can be done in communist China. And I think it's the second largest conference call in China. The biggest one is the one that Xi Jinping did during the early days of the pandemic when he hosted 170,000 people conference call across China to mobilize the the campaign to fight COVID. So this is the second largest conference call in the history of CCP. And basically, Li Keqiang made a calling, basically a desperate call to remedy the economy. But I've seen that after that, a lot of some of the state media start to deleting his speech or deleting comments of his speech or minimize the impact of his speech at the conference. So as much as I think Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang maybe share the same goal of trying to fix China's economy, it's impossible. It's impossible for Li Keqiang to fix the Chinese economy, given that in the communist country, politics is always the #1 priority. Because the success of Li Keqiang's meeting would mean that everybody would have to focus on the dire situation that zero COVID policy has left on the Chinese economy, and that's detrimental to Xi Jinping's political power. So therefore, his message at the conference or the impact of the conference has to be minimized. If not, his political enemy would have to use that as a weapon against him politically. So that just shows you in a communist system, when politics rules over everything, it's impossible to remedy its economy because it will always be the secondary concern. So to the communist leader, I mean, it's the most important concern to its citizens, but it's not a top concern for its leader. And you say, well, why? Wouldn't Xi Jinping be happy if the economy is doing well and people are happy and people like him? It's not. Like I said in one of my previous videos, his job is his political mission right now is defined by the political infighting. His political enemies, what his political enemies is doing defines his agenda. So he is playing defense like desperately. Okay. Do I have any other questions here? Why would China invade Taiwan given their entire situation now? Wouldn't that just expand the pain? That's a very good question. So, yeah, on the surface, it looks like China or the CCP is getting ready to take over Taiwan militarily. But if you really look at deep down, it may not be as simple as that. It wants to, but it's also very careful. You know the word bluffing? I think CCP is the master of bluffing. Sometimes they would do these things just to create the mood that it's going to do something, to create, maybe to give them a better position in bargaining. So I think the real situation is a lot complex than what meets the eye. Yeah, so to answer that question, we'll have to do a video on that. Okay, let's see, do I have any other questions? I have a lot of savings in ICBC Bank in China. Should I be worried? If there's any way you can move it out, I would do it. Why leave it in China? You can actually spend money in Chinese bank here in the U.S. I just heard from a friend that when they went to Costco shopping, they used their Union Pay. They used their Chinese credit card. They basically debited the money directly from their Chinese banks, and they were able to do that. So yeah, so you can spend your Chinese money here. You know, why not spend it while you still have it? If the CCP collapses, will China be split about the into different countries? I don't think so. If you look at Chinese history, no matter how difficult the situation is, China has always been together as a nation, and this is the driving force. The underlying force is Chinese culture. Chinese culture has this homogenizing power that accepts. By homogenizing, I don't mean it's trying to make everyone the same. By homogenizing, I mean it has this ability to accept a foreign culture or a different culture into one of its own and make it part of its culture. Actually, Chinese culture is traditional Chinese culture is very open and accepting. So like throughout Chinese history, you have other invaders that invaded China and established their dynasties. But after they established their dynasties, they very quickly adopted Chinese culture and integrated their culture with the Chinese culture. So I think it's because of the Chinese culture, 5,000 years of Chinese culture, China as a nation will not fall apart. And I think Chinese people are one of the most, how to say, the toughest people I've seen. They have endured so much in the past 70 years under the communist rule. And when the CCP falls, they as a nation will come together and reflect, you know, what they have been gone through. Sorry, every time I think of Chinese people, I feel a little emotional. I have not been able to go back to China for many years. Sorry. And I do miss them. Okay. Why are the Chinese who recently arrived in Southeast Asia are arrogant, mean, and demanding? That's a very good question. I don't think Chinese by nature are like that. That's not the Chinese that Confucius have taught. I don't know why I'm crying. This is a little ridiculous, but it's okay, I guess. I think Chinese cannot be who they are for the past 70 years. The communist regime has turned them into a group of people that are rude, because during the Cultural Revolution, all traditional values and all traditional Chinese culture has been destroyed. So I remember a Chinese friend told me this. He said, we're so poor that the only thing we have left is money. because everything else has been destroyed. Traditional Chinese values, beliefs, it's all destroyed systematically during the Cultural Revolution. And during that time, you know, the dirtier you look, the more high class you are, the rough, the so basically they turn very rogue behavior into high class behavior. And that completely changed Chinese people's manner upside down. You don't realize that when you live among them. You have to be consciously thinking why we're different from the rest of the world in order to find the answer. And when you find the answer, you really don't want to go back. So I think when the CCP leaves China, I think the Chinese nation, Chinese people will rediscover themselves. I think that would be the beginning of a great revival of the Chinese civilization again. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I made a video on that. You should watch it. It's called Why Chinese Have Bad Manners. I think that video explains why Chinese people are rude. I don't want to say they're rude. I really see them as the victims. You know, when your culture is taken away from you, you don't know what you don't know. Right? So yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I'd like to hear your visions about the relationship between China, Bill Gates, and Fauci. That's a big topic. I don't think I'm able to answer that here. I'll have to do some research, and I don't want to make any claims. I would see the real China someday, yes. If you haven't made a video about this, how do you think the Shanghai lockdown, zero COVID as a whole will affect the Chinese economy and worldwide economy? I have made a couple of videos on that already. Actually, you should start watching the videos I made since February or since March. Excuse me. I think I made quite a number of videos on that topic. Okay, so let's see. Other questions. Okay. What's your position on the Epoch Times? Okay. A lot of people make comments about Epoch Times in comments. Epoch Times is one of the earliest medias that start reporting China objectively. Of course, that makes the Chinese government, or I should say the CCP, very annoyed. But in my view, they are one of the most credible media on China. I do read their Chinese version. I find there's a difference between their Chinese version and English version. When you read their English version about China, it feels a little watered down. And that's the problem with a lot of the English language media. Once it's translated into English, it feels very watered down. But their Chinese edition is very, very good, and I use them a lot. Some people don't like them. It's probably because from decades of the Chinese propaganda. I mean, the Chinese government has been defaming them from the very beginning. But if I look at, I mean, they've been around for 20 years, at least 15 years, right? Quite a long time. So for someone to be able to consistently report it on China for 50 more years, that's not random. So you have to give them credit for doing that for over 15 years. I think it's probably 20 years now. So they I think what they're doing is very admirable. Okay. Do I have questions? Do you have a Mandarin version? I don't. The reason is I don't have the time and then the resources to translate everything into Chinese. And then if she reads Chinese, she should there's so much more information about what I mean, there's just so much more information about China in Chinese that she can read. I hate to see you so distressed. You are Chinese and love the real China. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's because I have been doing this I have been really working hard on this channel. I work very, very hard, and I don't have time to feel anything. Sometimes I feel very sad, when I make the video, but I've never talked to people about how I feel about China. So you get to see the first genuine response from Lei about how she feels about China. Okay, so let's see. I would like to know more about your own background and sourcing so I can more easily share your videos with friends and professionals. Okay, I I had been a financial analyst working for a major financial institutions for, I don't know, 15 years, maybe, yeah, 15 years. So my background is analysis. So I have a very analytical mind. Uh, and I'm Chinese. I was born and raised in China, so I understand communism very well. I just I don't see myself as an expert. I never do. I just think that there's just so much information out there in Chinese language about China that the Western world does not know. You guys don't have the access to it. And I think I could organize them, compile them, and then analyze them and offer my insight. That's what I do. And sourcing, all my sourcing are media reports, whether it's mainland Chinese, overseas Chinese media, or Western media. I don't use hearsay or rumors. If it's rumors that I heard, I will tell you it's a rumors. So, and I'll always try to provide references in my link. Sometimes there's so many references, I don't always keep track of them. Um, so, so that's what I do. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There are a lot of Chinese who feel the same way like you. I mean, in the Western world, or they just don't care. I don't know. I think there are. I think there are a lot of Chinese feel the way I do, at least from my friends and families. But many are afraid to speak up. Uh, I guess I'm one of those people who are not afraid to speak up. Okay. Can you do a video about Chinese geopolitical strategy in relation to India? Yes, I'm working on that. Um, I'm working on that. The live stream is very nice. I get much more of a sense of your personality. Okay, good. Well, you see me laugh, you see me cry. I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide from you. In a way, you are my extended family. All right, so it's 45 minutes. I don't plan to drag on for a long time. I understand you're all very busy. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday night or Sunday morning with me. This is my first live event. I never knew how it will go, but I did it. I thank you very much. If you want me to do more of this, let me know, give me comments. And I hope if we can do this more often, it would be great. Okay, let's see. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hate to say goodbye, but I'll have to click end stream. Okay, bye. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great weekend. Bye.